Dr. Yuna pressed her face against the observation window and watched the stars disappear. One by one, they vanished behind massive shapes that moved through space like living shadows. The research station Kethmara had been her home for 3 years, floating peacefully around a dying star while she studied ancient alien artifacts. Now it felt like a trap. How many ships? Captain Jinwoo asked from behind her. His voice was calm, but Yuna could hear the worry underneath. Too many to count, she whispered. They're everywhere. The things approaching their station were not normal spaceships. They looked alive, with surfaces that pulsed like skin and weapon ports that opened like hungry mouths. The Devourers had found them. Yuna had read about these creatures in old reports, but seeing them was different. They were bigger than she had imagined, and there were so many of them. Selman ran into the observation room, her communication headset still buzzing with static. Captain, they're not responding to any signals. No warnings, no demands. They're just coming straight for us. Jinwoo nodded grimly. He had fought in border wars before, but never against anything like this. The Devourers were different from other enemies. They did not want territory or resources. They wanted to eat everything alive, to absorb entire civilizations into their growing mass. Sound the evacuation alarm, he ordered. Get everyone to the escape pods. Sir, the escape pods won't help, Sumin said quietly. Those things are surrounding us. They'll catch any ship that tries to leave. Through the window, Yuna watched the first Devourer ship reach their outer defense platform. The station's automated weapons opened fire, sending bright streams of energy toward the creature. The shots hit the ship's surface and seemed to burn through its skin. For a moment, Yuna felt hope. Maybe their defenses would work. Then she watched the burn marks heal themselves. The ship's skin grew back stronger than before, darker and tougher. The next weapon blast barely left a mark. They adapt, she said in horror. They learn from every attack and become immune to it. Jinwoo was already running toward the bridge. All defensive teams rotate your weapon frequencies every 30 seconds. Don't give them time to adapt. Target their weapon ports, not their hulls. But even as he gave orders, more Devourer ships reached the station. Their living weapons tore through the outer defenses like paper. The station shook as pieces of metal and concrete were ripped away. Taehyun, the station's archaeologist, found Yuna in the artifact storage room. She was staring at the collection of ancient devices and weapons that had been gathered from dead civilizations across the galaxy. We need to evacuate, he said urgently. The outer sections are already compromised. No, Yuna said slowly. We can't leave. Do you know what's in this room, Taehyun? Some of these artifacts are millions of years old. If the Devourers get them, they could become unstoppable. She picked up a small crystal device that hummed with inner energy. This is a Starkiller weapon from the Velnathi Empire. And this, she touched a metal sphere, is a consciousness transfer device that could give them the memories of every species they've consumed. The station shook again, harder this time. Emergency lights flickered on as the main power systems took damage. Minji, a young diplomatic aide, stumbled into the room. The captain says we have maybe an hour before they break through the main hull. The crew is falling back to the central core. An hour, Taehyun repeated. That's not enough time to move all these artifacts. Yuna's mind raced through possibilities. They could destroy the artifacts, but some of them were the last remaining examples of extinct civilizations. To lose them would be to lose history itself, but if the Devourers took them, they would become weapons of mass destruction. Wu Jin, the maintenance chief, came running down the corridor. Dr. Yuna, we've lost the outer ring. Those things are cutting through the hull like it's soft cheese. And they're not just destroying, they're eating the metal itself. The truth hit Yuna like a cold wave. The Devourers were not just attacking randomly. They were methodically working their way toward the center of the station. Toward the artifact vault. They know, she said quietly. They know what we have here. Captain Jinwoo's voice echoed through the communication system. All remaining personnel, retreat to the core section. Seal all blast doors behind you. We're going to make our final stand. As they ran through the corridors, Yuna saw the destruction the Devourers had already caused. Holes in the walls showed twisted metal and sparking wires. In some places, the metal itself looked like it had been digested, leaving behind organic-looking surfaces that pulsed with alien life. The central core of the station was designed to be the most secure area. Triple-layered blast doors, independent life support, and its own small reactor. 23 survivors gathered there, representing 6 different species from across the galaxy. Scientists, security officers, maintenance workers, and diplomats, all that remained of the station's crew of over 200. Hae-yun, the quantum engineer, was working frantically at a control panel. "I can give us maybe 2 hours if I reroute all power to the blast doors," she said. "But after that, nothing will stop them." Nayeon, a young research intern, sat in the corner with tears in her eyes. "I've been monitoring their biosignatures," she said. "They're not just ships. Each one contains thousands of individual creatures, all connected in a hive mind, and they're getting smarter as they absorb our technology." Chae-young, who managed the station's artificial intelligence systems, looked up from her computer. "I've been analyzing their attack patterns. They're not trying to kill us quickly. They're being careful, methodical, like they want to capture something intact." Captain Jinwoo stood in the center of the room, looking at his mixed crew of survivors. "Any suggestions?" "Because our weapons are useless, our defenses are failing, and we're trapped like fish in a barrel." The blast doors shuddered as something large hit them from outside. Then came a sound like metal being chewed, slow and deliberate. The Devourers had reached the final barrier between them and the artifacts. Dr. Yuna walked to a secured cabinet in the corner of the room. Inside, protected by multiple locks and warning signs, was a device she had hoped never to use. A summoning array from an ancient civilization banned by the Galactic Council for over 2 centuries. "There is one option," she said quietly, "but it might be worse than the Devourers." She pulled out the device, a complex arrangement of crystals and metal that seemed to bend light around itself. "We can summon a human." The room fell silent except for the sound of metal being torn apart outside the blast doors. Every pair of eyes stared at the device in Dr. Yuna's hands. "A human?" Minji whispered. "Are you insane?" The council banned human summoning for good reasons. Taehyun took a step back from the ancient device. "I've read the historical reports. The last time someone summoned a human, an entire star system ended up under human control. They refused to leave when the crisis was over." "That's not the worst part," Woojin said grimly. "Humans don't follow orders. They don't respect authority. They make their own decisions about what's right and wrong." Captain Jinwoo studied the summoning array with professional interest. "I've fought alongside human mercenaries before. They're effective, I'll give them that. But they're also completely unpredictable." Dr. Yuna carefully placed the device on the central table. The crystals within it began to glow softly, responding to her touch. During the Liberation Wars, humans ended 14 different conflicts across the galaxy, but they also overthrew 6 governments and started 3 new rebellions. "Because they don't understand the concept of acceptable losses," Chae-young added. "Other species will sacrifice millions to save billions. Humans try to save everyone, even when it's impossible." Someone monitored her communication equipment. "I'm picking up Devourer biotransmissions. They're coordinating something. The attack on our blast doors is about to intensify." As if responding to her words, the doors groaned under massive impact. Sparks flew from the control panels as power systems overloaded. Haeyeon looked up from her calculations. 20 minutes until they break through. Maybe less. Nayeon clutched her data pad. "I've been studying the historical records of human interventions. The survival rate for the people who summon them is actually very high. It's everyone else who needs to worry." "That's because humans don't understand the word impossible," Minji said. "They'll find a way to win, but they might destroy half the galaxy doing it." Dr. Yuna picked up the summoning device again. "The alternative is certain death, and if the Devourers get these artifacts, they'll have the power to consume entire sectors without opposition." She looked around the room at the faces of her colleagues, scientists who had dedicated their lives to understanding the universe, brave crew members who had volunteered for dangerous frontier research, young interns just starting their careers, all about to die because of creatures that existed only to consume and destroy. "The summoning process requires life force from multiple individuals," she explained. "Not death, but a portion of everyone's lifespan, maybe a few years from each of us." "Better than having no years left at all," Captain Jinwoo said grimly. Taehyun helped her set up the device in the center of the room. The ancient crystals formed a complex pattern that hurt to look at directly. "The instructions say we need to focus on the type of human we want to summon, someone suited to our particular crisis. What type fights impossible odds and doesn't give up? Wu Jin asked. A soldier, Heian said immediately. Someone trained for combat. No, a strategist, Minji countered. Someone who can outthink the enemy. Dr. Yuna shook her head. According to the historical records, the summoning array doesn't work that way. It doesn't give you what you want, it gives you what you need. The blast doors began to buckle inward. Through the gaps, they could see writhing organic masses pushing through, like enormous worms made of living metal. The devourers had almost broken through. Everyone join hands around the device, Yuna commanded. Focus your thoughts on our situation. Let the array determine what kind of human can help us. 23 beings from 6 different species formed a circle around the summoning array. As they concentrated, the crystals grew brighter. Energy began to flow between them, pulling something vital from each person. Chaeyoung felt years of her life flowing out of her and into the device. Soman felt her hair turn a shade grayer as her lifespan shortened. The device began to sing, a deep harmonic tone that seemed to vibrate through their bones. Reality around the array started to shimmer and bend. Space itself was being twisted into new shapes. It's working, Taehyun gasped. I can feel the dimensional barrier thinning. Outside their circle, the blast doors finally gave way. Devourers poured into the room, creatures that looked like a nightmare fusion of machine and living tissue. They had metal claws and organic sensors, weapon ports that dripped with acidic fluids. But as the first devourer entered the core chamber, it stopped moving. Its bio-neural networks detected something that triggered ancient genetic memories buried in its consciousness. Something that made its entire species instinctively afraid. The summoning array tore open a hole in space and time. Through the rift came the sound of distant explosions and shouting voices. Somewhere else in the galaxy, a battle was raging. A figure stepped through the dimensional tear, human-shaped but wearing strange armor that was scarred from countless fights. The being carried weapons that looked both primitive and deadly, projectile guns instead of energy weapons, metal blades alongside advanced technology. The human looked around the room, taking in the situation with quick, intelligent eyes. Alien creatures cowering behind furniture, monsters with claws and teeth pouring through a broken doorway. A research station under attack. He didn't ask for explanations or demand to know why he had been summoned. Sergeant Donghyun Kim, Human Defense Force, he said in a calm voice. Someone want to point me toward the weapons locker? The devourers hesitated at the edge of the room. Their collective consciousness was processing new information. According to their genetic memory, humans were dangerous. Not because they were stronger or faster than other species, but because they refused to follow the rules of warfare that every other civilization accepted. Dr. Yuna pointed toward a wall panel. Emergency weapons are stored there, but they won't work against the devourers. These creatures adapt to any attack. Sergeant Donghyun walked calmly to the weapons locker, while dozens of monsters watched him. He selected several items that looked inadequate for the situation. A plasma cutter used for repairs, some explosive charges meant for mining, and a simple metal crowbar. Adaptation takes time, he said thoughtfully. The trick is not giving them time to adapt. The first devourer moved toward him, claws extended. Donghyun swung the crowbar with perfect timing, striking the creature in what looked like a sensor cluster. The devourer reeled back, confused. No other species had ever used such a primitive weapon against them. Rule 1 of human warfare, Donghyun said, hefting the crowbar again. When the enemy expects advanced tactics, use simple ones. When they expect simple tactics, get creative. He smiled at the gathered survivors. Now, who wants to help me turn this research station into a fortress? Sergeant Donghyun Kim moved through the research station like he owned it. Within minutes of arriving, he had transformed their desperate last stand into something that looked almost like a plan. You, he pointed at Wu Jin, I need you to show me every maintenance tunnel, every service duct, every way to move around this station without using the main corridors. Wu Jin stared at him. But the devourers control most of those areas now. Not for long, Donghyun said, checking the explosive charges. They're expecting us to defend this room. Instead, we're going on the attack. Dr. Yuna watched in amazement as the human examined their defensive setup. Every other species in the galaxy fought the same way. Established defensive positions, Coordinate with Central Command. Follow established tactical doctrine. Humans did none of these things. The maintenance shafts connect to the station's power distribution center, Wu Jin explained, pulling up schematics on his handheld device. But it's completely overrun with devourers. Perfect, Donghyun smiled. That's exactly where I want to go. He turned to Haeun. How long before you can overload one of the power cores? Overload? She gasped. That could destroy half the station. That's the idea. But I need it to be controlled. A big explosion in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. Heen's engineering mind began working despite her fear. I could create a cascade failure in Core 3. It would take out everything within a 50-meter radius. How long to set it up? Maybe 20 minutes if I have access to the control systems. Donghyun nodded. Wu Jin, you're with me. We're going to clear a path to Core 3. Everyone else start moving the most important artifacts to the escape pod base. The escape pods won't work, Captain Jinwoo reminded him. The Devourers have the entire area surrounded. They won't be surrounding anything once we're done, Donghyun said confidently. Taehyun helped gather the most valuable artifacts while watching the human prepare for his mission. Are all humans like this? Like what? Naeon asked, documenting everything she saw. So, confident. Like they've already won the battle before they start fighting. Through the damaged blast doors, they could hear Devourers moving through the station. The creatures were being more careful now, aware that something dangerous had entered their hunting ground. Donghyun and Wu Jin crawled through a maintenance shaft that led toward the power cores. The human moved silently despite his armor, using hand signals that Wu Jin somehow understood even though they had never worked together before. How do you know where to go? Wu Jin whispered. Space stations are all built the same way, Donghyun replied quietly. Humans have been fighting in them for centuries. You learn the patterns. They reached a junction where 3 tunnels met. Through the grating, they could see Devourers in the corridor below. The creatures were examining the station's technology, learning how to operate the systems. Donghyun pulled out one of the explosive charges and modified it with tools from Wu Jin's maintenance kit. When I say now, you run toward Core 3 as fast as you can. Don't look back, don't stop, just run. What about you? I'll be right behind you. Donghyun dropped the modified charge through the grating. It landed among the Devourers and immediately began making a high-pitched whining sound. The creatures gathered around it, their adaptive instincts trying to understand this new threat. Now, Donghyun whispered. Wu Jin ran. Behind him, the explosive charge detonated with a blinding flash and a sound like thunder. But instead of a normal explosion, it created a sphere of energy that disrupted the Devourers' bioneural networks. The creatures stumbled around blindly, their coordination destroyed. In the core chamber, the survivors felt the station shake. What was that? Minji asked. Chae-Young monitored her systems. Some kind of electromagnetic pulse. It disrupted Devourer communications across 3 sectors of the station. Impossible, Captain Jinwoo said. Our weapons don't have that kind of effect on them. Human weapons do, Dr. Yuna said thoughtfully. They don't just adapt to what exists, they create entirely new approaches. Donghyun and Wu Jin reached the power distribution center. Haeun was already there, having taken a different route. She was working frantically at the control panels. 5 more minutes, she called out. But I need you to keep them away from the primary control node. More Devourers were approaching from multiple directions. Their hive mind had recovered from the electromagnetic disruption and was adapting to the humans' tactics. Donghyun looked at the approaching enemies and made a decision that would have gotten him court-martialed in any normal military. Instead of using weapons, he began dismantling the environmental systems. What are you doing? Wu Jin asked in horror as artificial gravity shut down in their section. Humans evolved in 3-dimensional environments, Donghyun explained, pushing off from a wall to float toward the ceiling. Most aliens didn't. The Devourers entered the chamber and immediately struggled with the zero gravity. Their movements became clumsy and uncontrolled. Donghyun moved between them like a dancer, using their mass against them, redirecting their attacks into each other. Done, Haeun shouted. Core 3 will overload in 60 seconds. They raced back through the maintenance tunnels as the countdown proceeded. Behind them, Devourers tried to follow but were slowed by the humans' unconventional tactics. Environmental hazards, improvised weapons and combat techniques that no military academy taught, 40 seconds, 30, 20. They burst into the core chamber as the explosion erupted through the station. But it wasn't random destruction. Hyun had calculated the exact placement to collapse specific sections while leaving the central core intact. Soman monitored the external communications. The Devourer fleet is repositioning. They're confused. Half their boarding parties just got cut off from their command ships. Nayeon checked her readings. Biosignature analysis shows over 60% of the creatures on our station are dead or disabled. 60% in 1 hour, Taehyun said in amazement. One human did what our entire defense force couldn't do, but Donghyun wasn't celebrating. He was studying the station schematics with a worried expression. This isn't over. What we just did was the easy part. Easy? Captain Jinwoo stared at him. The Devourers were holding back because they want something from your artifact collection. Something specific. Once they realize we're not going to make it easy for them, they'll stop being careful. Dr. Yuna felt a chill of understanding. You mean they'll just destroy the station to get what they want? Worse, Donghyun said grimly. They'll start using their real weapons. What we've seen so far is just their scouting force. Through the observation windows, massive shapes began moving in the space around the station. Devourer ships the size of cities with weapons that could crack planets. Now, Donghyun said, we get to the really dangerous part. Dr. Yuna stared at the artifact in her hands, her face pale with understanding. The small crystal device that she had been studying for months suddenly made terrible sense. Taehyun, bring me the metal sphere from Vault 7, she commanded urgently, and the resonance generator from the Kethlon collection. Dr. Yuna, what's wrong? Nayeon asked, noticing the scientist's distress. I've been such a fool, Yuna whispered. We thought these were separate artifacts from different civilizations. But they're not. They're components of a single system. Sergeant Donghyun looked up from planning their next defensive move. Something in the doctor's voice told him this was important. What kind of system? A weapon, she said quietly. Something called the Silence Protocol. It was designed by an ancient civilization to eliminate all intelligent life in the galaxy. The room fell silent. Even the distant sounds of Devourer movement seemed to pause. Chaeyoung pulled up historical records on her computer. I'm finding references to the Silence Protocol in the oldest archives. It was supposedly used once about 12 million years ago. An entire galactic civilization just disappeared overnight. Not disappeared, Dr. Yuna corrected. Exterminated. Every thinking being in over 400 star systems dead in minutes. Taehyun returned with the additional artifacts. As soon as he placed them near the crystal device, all three began to resonate in harmony. The effect was beautiful and terrifying. So the Devourers want to complete the weapon? Captain Jinwoo asked. No, Dr. Yuna said, studying the readouts from her instruments. It's worse than that. I don't think the Devourers are invaders at all. I think they're survivors. She pulled up genetic analysis data on her screen. Look at this. Deep in their bioneural structure, there are traces of original DNA patterns. Before they became the creatures we know as Devourers, they were something else. Chaeyoung's eyes widened as she understood. They're the descendants of whatever civilization was targeted by the Silence Protocol. They survived by evolving into something that could resist the weapon. And now they're trying to find all the components before someone else can use the weapon against them again. Woo Jin realized. Sergeant Donghyun examined the artifacts with professional interest. So we have pieces of a doomsday weapon, and the Devourers want to capture them to prevent another genocide. That's what I thought, Dr. Yuna said. But then I translated more of the ancient text. The Devourers aren't trying to destroy the weapon components. They're trying to complete the weapon themselves. The implications hit everyone at once. If the Devourers completed the Silence Protocol, they could eliminate every other intelligent species in the galaxy, ensuring that they would never again face the threat of extinction. Somin's communication equipment suddenly crackled with an impossible sound. Coherent speech in a language none of them recognized. That's impossible, she said. I'm receiving a direct transmission. The Devourers are trying to communicate. Chaeyoung quickly connected her translation software to the signal. Slowly, words began forming on her screen. Ancient enemies, the translated message read. You possess fragments of the Great Silence. Surrender them willingly and your deaths will be swift. Resist and we will consume your world slowly. Donghyun studied the message. They're afraid. Creatures that have conquered half the galaxy, and they're afraid of us. Not us, Dr. Yuna said thoughtfully. They're afraid of what we might do with the weapon. Which is what exactly? Minji asked. The same thing their ancestors' enemies did 12 million years ago. Use it to commit genocide. Naeon accessed more historical records. I'm finding documentation of other species that encountered pieces of the Silence Protocol. In every case, when facing extinction, they attempted to activate the weapon. And did they succeed? Woojin asked. Most of them were destroyed before they could complete it, but 3 civilizations managed to activate partial versions of the protocol. What happened to them? They won their wars, Naeon said quietly, but they also sterilized entire sectors of space. Billions of innocent beings died along with their enemies. Sergeant Dongyun was quiet for a long moment. So the Devourers expect us to try to use this weapon. Every species does when faced with extinction, Dr. Yuna confirmed. It's the logical choice. Activate the Silence Protocol, eliminate the Devourer threat, and save the galaxy. Except it wouldn't just eliminate the Devourers, Chae-Young said, reading more of the ancient documentation. The weapon doesn't discriminate. It would kill every intelligent being within 1,000 light-years, including us, Taehyun added. Including everyone, Dr. Yuna said. That's why the Galactic Council keeps the weapon components separated and hidden. Because when civilizations get desperate enough, they always choose genocide over defeat. The communication system crackled again. This time, the Devourer message was clearer. We offer terms, it said. Give us the protocol fragments. We will spare this system and depart for the void between galaxies. You will never see us again. They're lying, Captain Jinwoo said immediately. Actually, I don't think they are, Donghyun said thoughtfully. Think about it from their perspective. They've spent millions of years evolving into the perfect survivors. The only thing they really fear is someone completing the Silence Protocol. So if they get all the components, they can destroy the weapon forever, Woojin suggested. Or complete it themselves and use it to clear the galaxy before anyone else can threaten them. Haeun countered. Dr. Yuna looked at the resonating artifacts. According to the documentation, the Silence Protocol requires a conscious activation command. Someone has to choose to fire it. The original designers built in that safeguard because they understood what they were creating. A weapon that could only be used by someone willing to commit universal genocide, Minji said with horror. Which means the Devourers can't just take the components, Chae-Young realized. They need someone to activate it for them. Or they need to eliminate everyone who might activate it against them, Dongyun said grimly. Outside the station, the massive Devourer ships moved closer. Their weapons ports were opening, revealing destructive power that could vaporize the research station in seconds. Decision time, Dongyun announced. We can give them the weapon components and hope they keep their word about leaving. We can try to activate the Silence Protocol ourselves and commit genocide to stop genocide, or what? Dr. Yuna asked. Sergeant Dongyun smiled, and for the first time since his arrival it wasn't a reassuring expression. Or we do what humans do best. We find a third option that nobody else thought of. He walked over to the artifacts and examined them more closely. Tell me, Dr. Yuna, what exactly does the Silence Protocol do? How does it kill everyone? It disrupts the bio-neural patterns that enable consciousness, she explained. Essentially, it turns off the ability to think. Permanently? The records suggest it's irreversible, yes. Dongyun nodded slowly. That's what everyone assumes. But humans have a saying. Permanent just means nobody's figured out how to reverse it yet. He looked around at the gathered survivors. How would you feel about reprogramming a doomsday weapon? Sergeant Dongyun Kim stood in front of the assembled artifacts, his mind working through possibilities that no other species would have considered. Around him, the survivors watched with a mixture of hope and terror. You want to reprogram the Silence Protocol, Doctor? Yuna asked in disbelief. The most dangerous weapon ever created? Not reprogram, Donghyun corrected. Reverse engineer. The weapon turns off consciousness permanently. But what if we could modify it to turn consciousness back on? Sungjae, the station's theoretical physicist, looked up from his calculations. You're talking about undoing millions of years of evolutionary adaptation. The Devourers have changed so much from their original form that we don't even know what they were before. Actually, we do, Chae-Young said, pulling up genetic analysis data. I've been comparing their deep DNA patterns to the galactic database. Their original species was called the Keth Mori. They were peaceful explorers and scientists. Peaceful until the silence protocol was used against them, Heon added grimly. Donghyun studied the data. So they survived by becoming monsters. But they weren't always monsters. That means there's still a part of their original nature buried in there somewhere. Even if that's true, Taehyun protested, how do you plan to activate a reverse silence protocol without killing ourselves in the process? We don't activate it from here, Donghyun said simply. We take it to them. The room erupted in protests. The idea was beyond dangerous. It was suicidal. The Devourer command ship is the size of a small moon, Captain Jinwoo pointed out. How exactly do you plan to get aboard? Through the maintenance tunnels they've been using to board our station, Donghyun replied. Woojin, you said those tunnels connect to their ship's hull, right? Woojin nodded reluctantly. They've been using our docking ports to create organic connection bridges, but those passages are crawling with Devourers. Not for long, Donghyun said. He turned to Yunsu, a young engineer who had been quietly working on modifications to their remaining equipment. Can you create a portable version of the protocol? Something we can carry? Hyunsu looked at the artifacts nervously. Maybe. If I use the station's quantum processing core to stabilize the resonance field. But it would only work once and at very close range. How close? You'd have to be inside their command ship, right next to their central consciousness. Perfect. Dr. Yuna grabbed Donghyun's arm. You're talking about walking into the heart of a Devourer hive ship. Even if you could get past their defenses, even if the modified protocol works, you'd never make it out alive. Probably not, Donghyun agreed calmly. But that's not the point. The point is stopping a cycle that's been going on for 12 million years. He looked around the room at the faces of beings from 6 different species, all united by their fear of extinction. The Devourers became monsters to survive. Then other species tried to become monsters to fight them, and the galaxy has been caught in that cycle ever since. So you want to break the cycle by giving them back their original nature? Minji asked. I want to give them a choice, Donghyun said. The same choice every species deserves. To be better than their worst impulses. Nayeon had been documenting everything, and now she looked up with tears in her eyes. The success rate for this plan is essentially 0. The success rate for any other plan is also 0, Donghyun pointed out. At least this way, we're trying to save everyone instead of killing everyone. Outside the station, the Devourer ships moved into final position. Their weapons were charging for an assault that would crack the station open like an egg. Soman intercepted another transmission. They're giving us one final chance to surrender the artifacts. How long until their weapons are fully charged? Captain Jinwoo asked. 15 minutes? Maybe 20. Donghyun looked at Hyunsu. Can you have the portable protocol ready in 15 minutes? If everyone helps, maybe. But we'd need to use the station's main computer core, and that's in the section the Devourers control. Leave that to me, Donghyun said. Just get the device ready. What followed was the most desperate 15 minutes in the station's history. While Hyunsu and his team worked frantically to create a portable version of the modified silence protocol, Donghyun led a small strike team through the maintenance tunnels toward the computer core. The passages were filled with Devourers, but the human moved through them like a force of nature. He used every trick he had learned, every advantage that human creativity could provide. Environmental hazards, improvised explosives, and combat techniques that defied conventional logic. Woojin followed behind him, amazed at what he was witnessing. How do humans learn to fight like this? We don't learn it, Donghyun replied between attacks. We invent it as we go. They reached the computer core with minutes to spare. Haeun quickly linked the modified protocol to the station's processing power while Donghyun held off waves of increasingly desperate Devourers. The device hummed to life, a small crystalline array that contained the power to restore an entire species to their original nature, or destroy everyone trying. It's ready, Hyunsu announced. But you'll have to get within 10 meters of their central consciousness to activate it. Donghyun took the device and headed toward the organic bridges that connected to the Devourer command ship. Behind him, the station survivors watched him go. He's really going to do it, Taehyun said quietly. He's going to try, Dr. Yuna corrected. Whether he succeeds or not, he's going to try to save beings that have been trying to kill him. The journey through the Devourer ship was a nightmare of living corridors and organic machinery, but Dong-hyun pressed forward, the modified protocol device clutched in his hands. He reached the ship's central chamber, a vast organic space where thousands of Devourer consciousnesses were linked together in a single hive mind. At the center was the Prime, a creature the size of a building that served as the focal point for their collective intelligence. The Prime turned its massive sensory organs toward the human intruder. "You come to activate the Great Silence," it said in a voice like grinding metal. "We will not allow genocide to succeed again." "I'm not here to commit genocide," Dong-hyun said, holding up the device. "I'm here to give you back what you lost." "Lies. All species choose destruction when facing defeat." "Not all species," Dong-hyun said quietly. "Not humans." He activated the device. The modified silence protocol erupted outward, not as a weapon of death, but as a wave of restoration. Throughout the Devourer fleet, creatures that had been shaped by millions of years of survival adaptation began to change. Their biomechanical augmentations fell away, revealing the original forms beneath. The transformation was not gentle. Creatures screamed as their consciousness expanded beyond the narrow focus of survival and consumption. They remembered what they had been before the fear of extinction had turned them into monsters. The Prime itself underwent the most dramatic change. Its massive, predatory form collapsed and reformed into something smaller, more delicate. When the transformation was complete, a being that looked almost like a tall, graceful humanoid stood where the monster had been. "We remember," the former Prime said in a voice filled with wonder and horror. "We remember who we were before the fear consumed us." Around the chamber, other Devourers were completing their transformations. They looked at their claws and weapons with confusion and disgust, as if seeing them for the first time. Dong-hyun collapsed, the effort of carrying and activating the device having drained the last of his strength. The former Prime knelt beside him. "Human," it said softly, "you have given us back our souls, but at what cost to yourself?" "The cost doesn't matter," Dong-hyun whispered. "What matters is that the cycle is broken." Across the galaxy, Devourer fleets stopped their attacks and began to change. The creatures that had terrorized civilizations for millennia were remembering peace, remembering wonder, remembering what it meant to create instead of consume. Dr. Yuna watched from the research station as the massive Devourer ships powered down their weapons and began broadcasting on peaceful frequencies. The beings that had once been the galaxy's greatest threat were asking for help in understanding what they had become and how they could make amends. "The human factor," she said softly. "The statistical anomaly that shows up whenever humans get involved in galactic conflicts." "What factor is that?" Naeon asked. "The refusal to accept that anyone is beyond redemption," Yuna replied. "Every other species would have tried to destroy the Devourers or been destroyed by them. Only a human would try to save them." Months later, the restored Kethmori had become the galaxy's most dedicated peacekeepers, using their intimate knowledge of warfare to prevent conflicts rather than start them. The research station became a symbol of hope, and the human summoning arrays were officially redesignated as Hope Protocols. Sergeant Dong-hyun Kim returned to his own war, but not before establishing training programs that taught other species the most important human military doctrine. Sometimes the most powerful weapon is the willingness to put down your weapons and choose mercy over victory. And throughout the galaxy, when civilizations faced impossible odds and certain defeat, they kept human summoning arrays ready, not as weapons of last resort, but as reminders that there was always a third option for those brave enough to choose hope over fear.